my god, okay, fine. I'll leave it. I just like, I'm gonna have to do so much scrolling.
I can put it on a different page.
No, it's okay.
You wrote too much.
We're supposed to have a 5-minute long script.
Yeah.
Maybe just like.
We wrote not enough. This is gonna be like 3 minutes.
Talk
No,
slower.
I counted mine.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna add something. Mine's gonna be like.
Find yours?
Yeah, remember?
Oh yeah!
I tested it on you.
Yes, you did.
Well, that was hers, technically. Mine isn't scripted.
Oh.
We just all helped write the first script. So the way it goes, the first 2 people have a script, and then I'm the attack speaker, so I just gotta make them look bad.
Your name is the tag speaker?
Yeah.
That's easy.
I know, that's why I'm...
That's why you put them there.
Or what is it? What's the other word for it? Rebuttal.
So, they're explaining.
Attack speaker, defense speaker,
What the hell's going on?
wrapping up.
I get pros and
I
cons.
just gotta make them look
They
bad.
told me that the Pilgrims were from the 1700s last night.
What does that have to do with anything we're talking about right now?
Because you were so.
My bad that I forgot they were from
You
the
were so adamant that they were from the
At the top, it's put your name, choose whether you're affirmative or negative, and then there's one for
Yeah, let me change that
fill
now.
that out for me really quick.
Change scenes.
I'll take those and use those to evaluate you guys a little
I'll
later.
just here for everything you say.
At the top, there's a space for your name, affirmative or negative.
Yeah, and that is.
And my name is Bailey, guys. Nice to meet you.
Probably agree if they don't. Huh?
Just really
Just what? Oh, we're giving them to you now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
And,
my bad.
you know, take
I was
a
all
look.
confused.
Yeah, take a second. We're not in a super big hurry.
What's your name?
I mean,
So
it's
my
still
name's
pretty.
Bailey. Check out the rubric.
Where's yours again? Okay, wait, so that's Eden's, yours
That's
is...
for negative and put 5.
And there's a lot of words on that rubric. It's not the first time you guys have seen it, hopefully, but
Yeah.
in general, you present your main points as if I'm a space alien, like what are we arguing today? And then you need to support those points with evidence and citations, good logic, and show that you're paying attention. It's cohesive, you're actually having a conversation with the other side. For delivery, just sound like you care and sound like you practiced it before, will be good. And then some sense of order and planning. So there's a lot of words on that rubric, but that's basically what we're looking for. Any questions about grading or anything like that?
Are there point realizations when they are underlined minutes?
Usually between 4 and 5, it's like So for timing cues, I usually give you 2 when there's 2 minutes left, and 1 when there's 1 minute left, and then a big stop when we're at 0. Be patient with me because I've got a timer, I've got some notes that I'm taking, but you guys will know when it's near the end of your time. I'm not super strict about like 5 minutes, stop every word, just finish that thought. Please be respectful about that rule, just finish that sentence, and then we'll sit down. I'll keep time, I'll let you guys know whose turn it is. And then just, we're learning, this is still classroom, I know it's a final assessment, but we're having a conversation. You guys know more about the death penalty than I do if you've done half of the homework in this class. So just have fun and learn from one another.
The crossfire.
Make sure that we're all like
Contribute.
something in.
Yeah, and some people are just concise, and you just present great arguments before.
Can we delete the references in this? Or
Oh, we already turned it in.
yeah, so we can delete these things.
Can I have it?
No, like we have it internally.
Well, not in
We have it like internally sort of.
Oh,
So this, that,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
like bibliography is just for the assignment. It'll just get in the way.
Everything's sweating on me.
All right, everybody familiar with the times? 5 minutes is the goal. We got 2-minute crossfires in each round. There's a grand crossfire that's 3 minutes. And I think we have 2 minutes of total prep time for each side. So if you guys want that, both sides can use it, obviously. Just let me know. I want
2.5.
2.5.
And then y'all are doing
So
2.5
each of you have 2.5 minutes. Ours is way
Is it
quicker.
2.5?
Yeah,
yeah,
so everyone has 5
Fourth
except
round,
our last 2
2.5.
have 2.5.
If either side in the 4th round goes over by about a minute, I'm comfortable with that, just since you guys probably did a lot of prep and it sounds like earlier you felt like you had other stuff first. I have a good feeling about that. I think you guys should feel prepared. All right, so let's do, who's my first affirmative speaker? All right, hello.
Can we close the door?
Yes.
Earlier, they were playing some really grave music, and it kind of worked out for like the fourth negatives.
Excellent. Yeah. Very dramatic. Very dramatic.
Okay, so I'm about to start a 5-minute timer. Any questions before we get started? This is 2 minutes, this is 1 minute.
Just first, I'll introduce them.
Yeah, and then just nod at me when you want me to start.
Okay. My name is Ella. Me and my teammates, Sari, Vanessa, and Ella, are arguing the affirmative side in support of abolishing the death penalty. Capital punishment has been a long debated, controversial topic, and this is for good reason, as the ability to take someone's life as a justification of justice should be discussed and reconsidered. The death penalty has had, no doubt, a tainted history of racial biases. For example, in the late 80s, the groundbreaking case of McKelvey v. Camp brought forth a remarkable case evaluating the racial precedents that have and still do exist in our court system. When accused of armed robbery and murder of a white police officer, McKelvey was sentenced to death. McKelvey filed a petition for the writ of habeas corpus, a crucial philosophy of social justice protecting against unlawful and indefinite imprisonment. As civil rights was in the midst of a reform in the 80s, this case, along with others, started a discussion in our justice system's inherent prejudice. Today, I don't believe much has changed. Our courts were formulated to use past precedents in order to make rulings. But with such a tainted and regressive history, a reform is long overdue. Not only is capital punishment biased against race, but also in turn against those experiencing poverty. According to the International Federation of Human Rights, 95% of prisoners on death row in the United States come from underprivileged backgrounds. The criminalization of poverty has increased a person's risk for arrest. The high cost of education, mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, and other treatments can push people into crime. Once they are put into the criminal justice system, people with money can pay for private lawyers, investigations, appeals, and other actions that would help them avoid the death penalty. People with no money have to rely on the underfunded public defenders. Because of this, the criminal justice system tends to push those with limited resources rather than those who are actually committing the most heinous crimes. The death penalty disproportionately affects those experiencing poverty, which means it's unjust and unfair. Capital punishment has also had a proven history of being an ineffective means of social reform. The deterrent value of the death penalty is little to none. According to Stephen Oliphant's recent study in the death penalty's effect on homicide rates, published in the Criminology and Public Policy, found no evidence of a deterrent effect attributable to the death penalty status. Research has also found that in 4 states, Washington, Illinois, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, imposed a moratorium on capital punishment. Unsurprisingly, even with the death penalty on pause, none of these 4 states saw a spike in homicides. In fact, the opposite was observed, as the murder rate slightly decreased. Death has been used as a punishment since the beginning of human civilization, but that doesn't mean it's humane or civil, and many nations across the world have realized this. Currently, there are 56 countries that carry out executions. Out of the 195 recognized nations, this number is a minority. And out of a handful of the countries, the U.S. ranks in number 6 for the largest number of executions, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. There are countries that have surpassed us, such as China, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, with more executions. Yet, being ranked next to these nations should be alarming. These nations are known to be very oppressive and are constantly in the spotlight for human rights reforms. 2/3 of the world's nations, including France, who used to use this punishment as a form of entertainment until the 1970s, have put in the work and time to reconsider this method of justice and deem it inhumane. Capital punishment has no place in this country. It is with its racially biased history, ineffectiveness to deter crime, as well as many other democratic nations that have already abolished such barbaric ways, the death penalty should be eradicated and be another dark chapter in U.S. history.
Who is my second first negative.
Like she did, I'm gonna go Roman numbers and then I'll start.
Okay.
Hello, thank you for being here today. Today, my team and I will be arguing for the negative side of the resolution that the death penalty should be abolished. Are you all ready? Judge, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Today, we will prove that the death penalty is a necessary and useful tool. Our weighing mechanism is utilitarian perspective in the U.S. What would have the greatest benefit for the majority? The death penalty is defined as death as punishment for a crime. Should is defined as an obligation to. Abolished is defined as to completely do away with, definitions from Merriam-Webster. The death penalty can only be imposed on defendants convicted of capital offenses such as murder, treason, genocide, or the killing or kidnapping of a congressman, the president, or a Supreme Court justice. Source from the U.S. Department of Justice. The criminal conduct must include murder or death must have resulted in order for the death penalty to be among the possible sanctions. Sourced from the United States Sentencing Guidelines 2021. The death penalty also serves as a deterrent to crime. The idea is that fear of facing the ultimate punishment may discourage potential criminals from committing violent acts. People are much less likely to commit violent crimes if they are certain they will be caught and punished, rather than Borg, 2000. There is always a possibility of escape or killing of a guard or a fellow prisoner, like Ted Bundy, who escaped twice and went on with his killings, and Ronnie Burgett, who killed a correctional officer in prison. There is also retribution, the assertion that punishment should fit the crime. In case of Gregg versus Georgia, 1976, Justice Marshall stated the retribution, along with deterrence, are important considerations of why the death penalty is necessary in some cases. In cases of extreme violence or brutality, the death penalty is just and proportional response. The death penalty cannot be represented as a cruel and unusual punishment because it already existed when the Eighth Amendment was already being written. The Supreme Court has, in many cases, taken an originalist interpretation of the Constitution, meaning they interpret it in the way it was meant when it was written. Since the death penalty was indeed used at the time of the Eighth Amendment's writing, it can be said that the Constitution supports the existence and use of the death penalty. Thus, the Supreme Court has ruled that the death penalty does not violate the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment, but the Eighth Amendment does shape certain procedural aspects regarding when a jury may use the death penalty and how it must be carried out. Source from Legal Information Institute. The Fifth Amendment, however, states that no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. This means that the framers believed that there were cases in which you could deprive someone of their life without due process. The death penalty is not used casually. The process is long, complicated, and thorough. The ultimate punishment is reserved for the ultimate crimes and provides a sense of closure and retribution for those who have suffered for the actions of condemned individuals. One of the most memorable and damaging questions of 1988 presidential campaign was raised by CNN correspondent Bernard Shaw during the second debate between candidates George Bush and Michael Dukakis, when Shaw asked Dukakis whether his opposition to the death penalty would be swayed if someone raped and murdered his wife, Drummond and Word Crover. As far as the worry that the death penalty may take innocent lives, in modern times, we have more advanced technology such as forensics and surveillance, which prevents and limits the ability of a wrongful conviction. We concede that the U.S. justice system is not the best, but the misuse of a tool sometimes does not mean it should be abolished entirely. As for the issue of racism with death penalty usage, I believe it is fair to say we all believe racism is bad. However, the existence of death penalty itself is not racist. The contribution to systemic racism is from the legal and judicial process that takes place long before the death penalty is even considered. If we want to fix our country's justice system, we must start with addressing the causes of systemic racism, not the consequences. The prison system is also racist, but we are not arguing to abolish the prison system. The issue of the death penalty's usage is no doubt complicated, but when considering all factors, we believe it is clear that outright abolishing the use of the death penalty is unwise. That's it.
So it's time for the crossfire. It's going and, you know, it is a conflict, but, you know, don't let people shut you down, don't like steamroll anyone, even if you are like really great debaters, that's awesome, but it's a sophomore level class, let's, you know, be civil. All right, you guys ready for crossfire? First, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, 2 minutes, ready, set, go.
You stated about racial bias in the late 80s. Do you have any updated cases about racial bias?
Yes. More recently, in 2003, the Supreme Court case of Miller L. v. Cottrell, the Supreme Court ruled that his favor that Miller L. should have been given the opportunity to prove that his death sentence was the result of discriminatory jury practices. Such practices included the so-called Texas shuttle to limit or eliminate African American jurors. My question for y'all is, you stated that since death penalty was already around during the writing of the 8th Amendment, that it can't be considered cruel and unusual punishment, but according to JSTOR library, around the 1700s, the same time the amendment would have been written, appropriate forms of punishment include stalking, whipping, burning, and starving, all in the public eye as well. So do you think that could be
The
allowed?
Fifth Amendment, however, states that no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. This means that the framers believed that there were cases in which you could deprive someone of their life with due process.
You also said that y'all believe the death penalty isn't deterrent of crime. Do you have any observable evidence such as statistics to prove this?
I do not. If you take out the race, does your argument still stand?
With other points such as those who live under the poverty line, the moral aspect behind all of this, and other countries abolishing it.
Great time, great crossfire, guys. Okay, ready. Do you guys want time or want to hop straight into the second round?
We'll take a little bit of time.
Okay, so like a minute maybe, or?
Let's do 30 seconds.
Okay, all right.
30 seconds. Yes.
30 seconds.
Okay.
So I'm not sure the microphone.
That's 30, guys. One more time, or? Okay, all right, cool.
One major reason why the death penalty is unethical and is possibly should be abolished is because of the botched executions. According to HumanRightsCareers.com, research shows that 3% of executions between 1890 and 2010 were botched. Lethal injection has the highest rate of error despite being the most common execution option. When injections go wrong, it can take a very long time for a prisoner to die. For example, in 2014 in Oklahoma, Clayton Lockett was subjected to a botched execution. The team tried to look for a viable vein before realizing they were working with the wrong needles. After that, it took at least 16 pokes to get an IV inserted, and Lockett was in clear distress as the drug started to enter his system. And the execution was halted, and he ended up dying of a heart attack 43 minutes after the first drug mitolazine was administered. These kinds of sedatives have played a role in several of these botched executions. I'd like to cover some of the racial biases that are here. So the definition of a racial bias or disparity, a racial bias is a form of an implicit bias which refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect an individual's understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. We cannot be unconscious when we are debating on someone's life. For example, McCleskey v. Kemp. In the 1987 Supreme Court case McCleskey v. Kemp, Counsel on behalf of death row prisoner Warren McClinsky argued that death penalty sentences in Georgia were racially biased related to the race of the victim. The court ruled against McClinsky, who was executed by electrocution in 1991, ruling that the racial disparities in the death penalty were not a violation of one's constitutional right of equal protection of the law. Next is Batson versus Kentucky. In this 1977 case, the Supreme Court ruled that prosecutors may not use race as a factor in eliminating potential jurors from the jury pool. Likewise, a former assistant district attorney in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, wrote explicit directions to his prosecutors on how to strike African Americans from juries without violating the Supreme Court's rule. So, there is no question about racial biases here. Of the 18 prisoners currently on federal death row, 16 are either African American, Hispanic, or Asian. From 1995 to 2000, 80% of all the federal capital cases recommended by U.S. attorneys to the Attorney General seeking the death penalty involves people of color. Even after review by the Attorney General, 72% of the cases approved for death penalty prosecution involved minority defendants. So, in saying all of this, racial disparities is not the only issue with not abolishing the death penalty, but it is one of the major factors as to the fallacies that are within this case. So I would.
Okay. Oh, are you finished?
Wait, how much time?
Oh, you have, sorry, 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
You're doing good. Okay, are you finished?
Oh, yes, I can keep going.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
You're doing good.
You mentioned before something about not being cruel, about it being cruel and unusual for us not to punish them by death, punish the criminals by death. However, as the jury system goes on an eye for an eye basis, we cannot say we're looking for an eye and take the whole body. We cannot say an eye for an eye and not know where the eye is. We need to know and understand that one crime does not justify another. One heinous act does not justify another.
All right, opponents, are you ready? Judge, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, I will start my timer
Right now.
So one of the things our opponents have stated is that with the lethal injection, there is a 3% failure rate, which involves in a longer process. Unfortunately, this may be considered cruel and unusual punishment, but it is not done on purpose because there's no way they fail on purpose. As for the reoffense rate, almost 30% of federal offenders that were released in 2005 have since reoffended with a violent crime. This is 30% is 10 times higher than 3%, which means this is much more dangerous chance to take. However, the reoffense rate for people who were given capital punishment is 0%. About 20% of violent prior offenders have had at least 10 former criminal charges. That's from the United States Sentencing Commission. That is 10 chances that we had to act properly and we didn't. How many other lives were lost due to government inaction? When you stated that the issue is with other countries, we were looking at this from a US perspective, but we do have a few examples just in case. There are 4 other countries that have more confirmed executions than the US in 2022. That is China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Our next door neighbors, Mexico, abolished the death penalty from all crimes in 2005. However, the homicide rate is significantly higher in the US, or even in China. In China, the homicide rate is 1 per 1,000, or 1 per 100,000. In US, it's 6.3 per 100,000. Both of these countries have the death penalty enacted. Mexico, that abolished the death penalty, has a rate of 25 per 100,000 as of 2022, and it used to be higher before that. This shows that the death penalty can be used as a deterrent, as countries without the death penalty have a higher homicide rate. The death penalty isn't just used willy-nilly. It is an extremely long and thorough process that is only taken on the most heinous of crimes. There's the arrest, arraignment, preliminary hearing, grand jury, indictment, information session, hearing on pre-trial motion, and then you need to state your intention to seek the death penalty. Then it goes through 3 more different trials before the death penalty can even properly be considered. Our opponents didn't mention this, but I thought it would be interesting to point out the economic factor of the death penalty. While it is true that it is less expensive to keep the prisoners alive than to execute them, this can be seen as a good thing to deter its use. Just think of tariffs. Taxes on foreign products are higher to deter the purchase of them. The death penalty being incredibly expensive is a good thing to make sure it is only used in the most serious of cases. Again, my opponents mentioned eye for an eye retribution. The death penalty can only be used if there was a murder or if a death resulted from the crime. So this is fair. A life for another is indeed an eye for an eye, as the death penalty cannot be enacted unless life was lost. We do concede that there is issues with the race and justice system along with the death penalty, but incorrect usage sometimes does not mean that it should never be used. There are many other factors at play that cause racial injustice. The racial injustice is a result of the justice system that happens before the death penalty is even considered. This is just the death penalty's contribution to systemic racism is a drop in the bucket compared to every other U.S. justice system issue. As for the violence of these crimes, there are criminals like John Wayne Gacy, who is a serial killer and sex offender that raped, tortured, and murdered at least 33 young men and boys. He was known as the Killer Clown. These killings happened over the course of 4 years. He clearly reoffended, so if the capital punishment was enacted on him, this could have saved many lives. Same thing goes for people like Ted Bundy, who committed 30 murders in the span of 4 years. He was put in jail but escaped and continued to murder after this trial, after he escaped prison. So if he was given the capital punishment earlier, which he was eventually given the capital punishment, this could have saved lives. Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people and injured hundreds more in bombings. He also received the death penalty. Rodney Burgett, a South Dakota inmate, killed a correctional officer during a prison escape when he could have received and then after that he received the death penalty. If he had received it before, then he wouldn't have been able to kill another person. He wouldn't have been able to take more life. Albert Fish was a serial killer, rapist, child molester, and cannibal. He had many, many victims that could have been saved had the capital punishment been enacted on him sooner. I believe that is my time.
Alright. You guys ready for crossfire?
Yes.
2 minutes starts now.
Okay, so our opponent mentioned that is only for the most heinous of crimes. However, we do have evidence of the opposite. So the Greatest Evils case in 1992 states that Charles Barton was placed on death row for a non-heinous crime, which was a robbery. Do you have evidence that the death row is only for heinous crimes?
Yes, we have our source from the U.S. Justice and Sentencing Commission, that there has to have been a death enacted in order for the death penalty to be used. I would like to ask where y'all's sources are. You've made several statements and only provided very few sources.
Okay, so that comes from...
I would like to point that out.
Okay, that study that I just shared came from ACLU.org on issues of capital punishment.
Okay, thank you. What is y'all's weighing mechanism and framework? I feel like you were not very clear in specifying what you were focusing on, issues of the U.S., but however you mentioned international countries, but provided no other evidence about international death penalties. So are you talking about the U.S. or are you talking about international countries? It's very unclear.
In the cases I presented, which I presented 3 cases that were from America, I gave both dates and names that were, yes, in America, but I've given, I think, ample evidence of those.
Yes, but your first speaker brought up international countries. Do you have any evidence of any international death penalty usage? No. Okay. So
I do have another question. You say that there are reoffenders out there. So if our justice system, that you're supporting death penalty, if you continue to allow your racial biases to affect your decisions, is that not an offense?
sorry?
Is that not an offense? Is it not an offense to allow racial biases to affect your decisions?
While yes, there is racial bias in the U.S. justice system, all of this happens without regard to the death penalty. The death penalty is just at the very end of the process.
Time. Okay, good job, guys. Alrighty, do we want some time for the next round, or just feel ready? Y'all wanna take a minute?
No.
A minute? Okay, let's do it.
We can use two.
So we, on the affirmative side, believe that the major arguments against the death sentence center on its humanity, lack of deterrence, persistence of racial and economic inequalities, and irreversibility. Proponents believe that it's just a retribution for specific acts and it deterrents crime, that it protects society, and that it preserves moral order. The death sentence has a history of dating back over 4,000 years, and its use has only lately been restricted. Law changes, research on sentencing patterns, civil rights group monitoring, and U.S. Supreme Court judgments have resulted in a system whose purpose is justice tempered by mercy. Federal courts postponed all executions in 1967. In 1967, until constitutional questions concerning capital punishment could be resolved by 1967. Most states' legislation had been changed to correspond Supreme Court rules, and the death penalty had been reinstated in 37 states. Despite revisions, guaranteeing fairness in death penalty imposition remains challenging, and the cost of capital trial appeal procedures are high. In the United States, a death sentence is imposed in an unfair and unjust manner against people, usually based on how much money they have, the quality of their attorneys, the victim's race, and the location of the crime. The individuals of color are considerably more likely to be executed than white individuals, especially if the victim is white. The death penalty is a waste of taxpayer money and provides no value in public safety. The vast majority of law enforcement personnel agree to that capital punishment does not prevent violent crimes. A study of police chiefs nationally indicated that the death penalty is harsh. So the death penalty is harsh and unusual. It is harsh because it is divested from the early days of penology when slavery, branding, and other forms of corporal punishment were popular. Executions, like similar archaic traditions, have no place in a civilized society. It is uncommon because among all Western industrialized nations, only the United States use this penalty. It is particularly unusual because only a small percentage of convicted murderers in the United States receive the death penalty. In addition, the death sentence is unjust since it sometimes applies to innocent people.